I'd like to call this meeting of the Bellingham Public Works Public Safety Committee to order. Joining me on the committee is Gene Knutson, and you're, well, Roxanne is not here yet, but April's setting in. The first item before us today is the City of Bellingham Whatcom County Fire District 8 interlocal agreement for fire and BLS emergency medical services.
Morning.
Now joining us is Roxanne Murphy. Okay. Chief?
Good morning, council members. Bill Newbold, Fire Department. And I want to start off before jumping into the material and just share with you kind of the excitement surrounding where we are today with this contract for service, and at times characterized as nervous excitement. Because as we move forward in this, it's really establishing some history for the City of Bellingham, the Bellingham Fire Department, and also Whatcom County Fire District 8. So launching into it before you is a contract for service whereby the City of Bellingham will provide fire and EMS services for Fire District 8 in front of you today for your consideration. And really this, it culminates something but expands on another instrument. And since February 2013, the city has provided fire administrative services to Fire District 8. A part of that contract was for both parties to continue to explore the feasibility for full functional consolidation. We spent about a year and a half looking at different forms of governance by way of history and your recollection. And as we did that, council provided us direction to look at expanding the contract for service, which is short of a full functional consolidation, but it does provide for the city to provide all the fire and EMS services to Fire District 8. I wrote a staff memo that I can step through the highlights here. Basically, one of the highlights of this contract for service is the 8 employees of Fire District 8, the 8 uniformed employees, will be transferred over to the City of Bellingham and become the City of Bellingham employees. All current and future volunteers of Fire District 8 will remain volunteers of Fire District 8. District 8 will also retain ownership of all of their fire stations, 3 of them that they have, and they will also retain ownership of all of their rolling stock, their fire engines, their staff vehicles, aid cars, etc. Along with retaining ownership, they'll also be financially responsible for the maintenance of the stations and the vehicles. We're going to be able to provide more stable staffing to the entire area that we'll be serving, both City of Bellingham and Fire District 8. We'll be doing that by providing 2 career officers to staff stations 31 and station 34. And then we'll also be providing 1 career firefighter driver, and that will be at station 31. That will leave, at this moment, a volunteer firefighter position at Station 31 and 2 volunteer positions at Station 34. The contract is structured such that if we do not have sufficient volunteers to fill those positions, we have depth of personnel in the City of Bellingham to be able to hire back firefighters to staff those positions. And in the proposal that was put together, we accounted for that potential within the contract amount that the district will be paying for the city. The initial term of the agreement is through December of 2020. A couple reasons for that. That does line up also with the district's maintenance and operations levy that was just passed this February and goes into effect in 2017. It's a 4-year maintenance and operations levy. And it also provides us sufficient time, if you look at the last bullet there, for both of the parties to continue to discuss in good faith the potential for or the exploration of a regional fire authority. So this is before you for your consideration to enter into that agreement. I also want to point out a lot of collaborative work that was done between fire administration and Local 106 leadership. We met with them and we explored our interests in what would be an MOU on the transfer of the employees, the items that they wanted to request of fire administration as far as protecting seniority and some of how some language would affect their members. We worked probably for about 9 months with them on that, and a really collaborative process. And just last week on Tuesday, the membership of Local 106, both combined, D8 and City of Bellingham, voted to support that MOU. Their membership voted to support it. So real pleased with the efforts that were made there. If I can answer any additional questions, I'll be happy to do so.
Committee, any questions? No.
I'm really happy to support this for the sake of simplicity and continuity and the fact that it's been so supported throughout the whole process and everybody working together on it. So I'm happy to move that we would authorize the contract for the City of Bellingham with Whatcom County Fire District 8 and our local agreement for fire and BLS emergency medical services.
Okay. Gene?
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy to support this, and thanks for all your work and everybody out there in Fire District 8. I know this has been a long discussion, and just a good deal for everybody.
Yep. I also will support it. I appreciate all the hard work that went into it prior to this, bringing everything forward and keeping us abreast as you went forward. So, yes.
Thank you. It's good to see you again. The last time we discussed a little bit about how the Capitol facilities would be maintained, and I learned a little bit more in the 2 stations that are out in District 8. Don't have a point capture system, much like what we have here in Bellingham is in regards to the health of the firefighters and what they might be inhaling. Is that that safety part of these, is that going to be happening right off the bat, or are we already doing some type of analysis on what we need to do at those stations?
That's a good question. There's nothing binding in either the contracts, either with the city or District 8 or the MOU. However, I will share with you the health and safety of the firefighters is always an ongoing concern of ours. And that is something that we've been exploring as Fire District 8, even just from the administrative side, aside from this contract. We're going to look for opportunities with that, with some grants that come up, and see what we can do as far as that. There's nothing specific to fund that right now from Fire District 8, other than when we do have availability and applying for grants to be able to put those point extraction systems in. They do have an air movement system, which is different than the point extraction. Point extraction certainly is probably the best system that you can install to ensure the discharge of those emissions go outside of the structure. So we'll be exploring that.
Okay. I have another one.
What? Anything else? Go ahead.
Yeah. You had mentioned that if a volunteer maybe isn't available, that we have some back staff to fill up. Are we going to be phasing volunteers out so if we do make a hire from the list of people that you suggested, would we then just not make that a volunteer position any longer?
So two questions there. The first one is we are not intending to phase out a volunteer program. What we are finding is that it becomes more and more difficult to rely on a volunteer workforce, not just here in Fire District 8, but throughout Washington, throughout the fire service in the United States. It is just changing. The way the volunteer program was set up historically in the United States, people living in that community being able to volunteer. People now are looking more for jobs. There's more career opportunities out there. We have a high turnover with volunteers, and just the time constraints and demands. So we're not looking to phase out the volunteer program. We're trying to position ourselves to be able to provide an adequate service as the volunteer firefighters become less reliable, that function. The second one, with regard to hiring the positions, District 8 itself can't do that today because they don't have the depth of personnel. But by integrating with the city of Bellingham, we provide that depth that they can fund the overtime spots, but they can't fund full-time equivalents. So we're able to do that. There is a provision in the MOU which we've looked at with annexation that occurs into Fire District 8 to provide an additional firefighter. That is something that provides the urban level of service that the city is doing so currently within its city limits. And so it's a trigger that would be able to provide that. And so we'll be exploring that when those annexations, if and when they do occur, into Fire District 8.
Okay. I just have one last one.
Okay.
Okay, so in the, they're still part of that District 8 that's the ALS transport is from District 7, correct?
The ALS contract is separate. The city of Bellingham is one ALS provider and District 7 is a second provider. Currently, Medic 1 and Medic 2, which are operated by Bellingham Fire, run into the District 8 location. There are areas of District 8 that District 7 does serve, and this will not alter that. That's driven by the county and what we call our FRLs, our fire response levels, and how those are set up. So this contract for service does not alter District 7 or the city of Bellingham serving ALS service.
So will most people that are in the UGA be getting in service from District 8 and Bellingham, or is that kind of outside the
Currently,
UGA?
as it is right now.
Okay.
We will internally modify whether Station 31 or Station 6 or Station 5 respond to some areas, but really functionally, there won't be a noticeable difference other than reliable staffing both at 31 and 34.
Okay, and it looks like, I mean, from everything I learned, thank you for this opportunity, because I learned a lot, but we will have, I learned the word brown down, so we'll be having less of those because we'll
That's
be
correct.
back. So,
That is correct.
so I think for a lot of us, we'll probably see a little bit better of service
Yes.
because we can do some backfill. So I appreciate all the work that you guys did, and thanks for answering my question.
You bet.
Okay, anybody, any other comments, questions? Okay, we have a motion before us. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll recommend approval tonight. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item is an ordinance amending the Bellingham Municipal Code to repeal BMC 10.30.020 and to adopt a new code section consistent with the state law to prohibit the unlawful display or carry of an electronic control device.
Good morning, Shane Brady from the legal department. So this was on for information only a couple weeks ago, so I don't really have much to add unless council had some more questions, but I think staff at this point is just asking for recommending you pass the ordinance.
Okay.
I'll move approval.
Okay. I've said my comments before, so there's no comments. All those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Okay. We will recommend approval tonight. Thank you for coming, Chief. You're welcome. I love a man of few words. Okay, let me see, where are we here? Our next one is an ordinance of amending Bellingham Municipal Code 9.12.080 by changing the penalty for non-compliance with the garbage collection code to a civil infraction.
So good morning again, Shane Brady from the legal department, and so this is, I guess, a police-related matter as well. But so I think just to clarify, this is in the packet as a recommendation to pass the ordinance, but my understanding is under the new protocol, this should just be information only today, and we can come back at the next council meeting and ask for, I guess, pass along a recommendation to pass it. So just wanted to get that out there.
Okay.
Just a question on that. Why would we do it that way? I'm just saying we've got,
You have to ask me.
Okay.
I think that there is an opportunity when something does come forward, if it's non-controversial, to do that. But what I want to make sure is when we have something that has more discussion, that it comes forward as Rick has been doing on the planning stuff, with an opportunity for council to ask a bunch of questions for staff to research answers and not have something done in the morning meeting and try to vote on it right then or in the afternoon. So there may be some things that end up not being necessary, but I wanted to start with everything so that we could determine which things you needed actual more deliberation time on and
That's
which
fine.
things were just housekeeping.
Maybe you could tell us why you want to do this. You know, that would be good.
That was my next item,
Okay,
Terry.
I thought you were done.
So, yeah, just for some context here, this came up as, I would say, housekeeping type matter. It came up in a conversation with the sheriff's office about the jail, about, some jail reduction measures or, things we could do differently. So we looked at our code, and there were some things that we were okay with, as far as that, affecting the jail. And this was an item where this was a crime to not have garbage service. And we felt that, okay, this is something we could probably decriminalize but still have effective enforcement, meaning we could cite somebody for a civil infraction, they'd have to pay a fine instead of being subject to possibly a jail time and a criminal conviction. So that's the context of how this is coming up. So the bottom line is, I think staff thinks that we can still enforce this law through a civil infraction effectively and have people comply without having, like I said, the possibility of criminal conviction, but also, it would be pretty unlikely that somebody would serve jail time over this, but nonetheless, it made sense just to decriminalize it. And I would add that this is something that doesn't come up very often. There's not that many people that are cited for this in general. Speaking with code enforcement at the police department, it's only been 4 citations in the past 5 years. So, and then 2, this isn't something where somebody would be arrested and taken to jail for not having garbage service. It would be a citation they would get in the mail or served on them. The only way they would end up in jail on something like this is if they failed to appear for a court hearing, and then they would have a warrant out for their arrest. So that'd be the only way they would end up in jail. So that's why I said this is a little bit of housekeeping, because I don't think there's going to be a huge impact on reducing the jail population, because we simply don't cite that many people for this.
Peter.
Yeah, I'd just like to add a little bit, Peter Raffato, Legal Department, to Shane's comments, and that is, when the jail reduction task force and all the discussion started, this was one of the items that the sheriff's office pointed out, that there had been a number of what was shown on a piece of paper as bookings for this charge. Come to find out, very few people, as Shane mentioned, I don't know if it's 4 people in 5 years or 5 people in 4 years, but what you'll see is just a whole bunch of, it takes a lot of misdemeanor citations for anyone to even get in that position to be facing, and a warrant to be facing jail. So I don't want to overemphasize, this won't have a big impact on jail use. But that being presented, I wanted, as I'll relate back to a memo that we put together in terms of all the things we're going to look at. This is one of them. It's kind of a due diligence item. We're going to look at everything. And this came out of the review of the code on those things that were identified by the sheriff's office.
Good. Gene?
I understand this is citywide, but does the county have the same sort of thing when it comes to garbage, or do we even know?
That I don't know.
Okay.
I'm kind of wondering with committee, this one doesn't seem like an item that I think we need a whole lot of a couple session discussion on. So I wouldn't be opposed if somebody wanted to move the passage of this ordinance now
Okay, I'll move
at
it.
all to save it from next.
Second.
Okay. Now, we couldn't have the penalty as home detention with their garbage, maybe?
That sounds like a good idea.
Just an idea.
Chain them to their garbage.
I wasn't thinking outside the box like that.
Okay. We got a motion before us. All those in favor, answer aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll recommend approval tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. And staff, thanks for going through those, because I think these kind of things are important. If we can eliminate the jail things, that's great. Yes, Mayor.
And I think that's exactly, how this worked out is exactly how I see it working out, is we should be able to present why we're doing it. And then if you think it's ready to go, it can go.
Yeah.
But there's some things I think deserve more discussion.
Yeah.
Well, I do too, but
Okay.
yeah, I appreciate it set up this way that we can do it. So our next item is to authorize the mayor to enter into an interlocal agreement between the City of Bellingham and Port of Bellingham regarding water main construction in the C Street right-of-way. Ted?
Thank you. Good morning. Ted Carlson, Public Works Department. As was just mentioned, the port is moving forward with improvements to C Street between Roeder Avenue and Laurel. It's part of their C Street Terminal project. Earlier this year, the city and the port entered into a different interlocal agreement, which gave the port access to use the right-of-way for their port operations. It's, in essence, a right-of-way that goes through Marine Trades area, used only by the adjacent properties, and that it was a license agreement that said the port could use the right-of-way as part of their port operations. So that was earlier this year. They approached the city sometime last year and said they were going to be doing significant improvements along C Street. At that time, we looked at our utilities as we normally do and identified our existing water main as needing to be replaced. So that's what brings us to this point. I'll turn it over to Chad Schulhauser, the city engineer, and he'll walk through just exactly what the project is and what the interlocal will accomplish.
Okay.
Good morning.
Thanks.
Chad Schulhauser, Public Works Engineering. As Ted mentioned, the port is moving forward with their C Street Terminal project. As part of that, we had identified some older 8 and 6-inch cast iron water mains in that right-of-way. With their project, they're doing roadway improvements, storm sewer, water improvements, and in order to upsize and upgrade those to current standards, since they are older water mains, we're partnering with them to get that done under their construction contract. We'll have a separate schedule so that we can keep track of all those costs, as well as the not only construction but their construction management costs, which we've already prepared. That's where you see the approximate fiscal impact of $250,000. That covers not only construction but also their construction management. And they're actually out to bid right now. They're opening bids this Friday, and we'll see what the numbers come in at that point in time. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have with regards to the construction project or the ILA.
Yes?
Well, I just want to say, the complete streets model is always my dream. So I love it. We can partner and take advantage of these opportunities to address multiple interests. So I'd be so happy to pass that we would vote to make a motion that we would vote to approve the mayor to enter into an interlocal agreement between the city of Bellingham and the Port of Bellingham regarding water main construction in the C Street right-of-way.
Okay. Any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll recommend approval tonight.
Thank you.
So another one coming up, I think, with Public Works and with Ted is the Orchard Drive Extension, Birchwood Avenue, ES-0440, Section 4F, impacts to the Bay to Baker Trail.
Yes, thank you. And Craig Mueller is going to be putting something up on the overhead here to give us a site map of what we're talking about. But the item before the council today is a function of our federal funding for the Orchard Street project. Anytime we have a federally funded project and we're working with the Department of Transportation, when there are impacts to park property, we have to go through a process that determines whether or not that impact to the park process is what they determine to be de minimis, very minor, and not significant in terms of impacting the public access to the park property. And that's the process that we're going through today. It needs to be done in a public forum, which is the city council process. It's not a public hearing, it's a process that we need to work through with the Department of Transportation. With that, I'll turn it over to Craig, and he can walk through exactly what the project is, where those impacts are, and what the impact to the parkland is.
Morning.
Morning.
I heard you like someone of few words, and unfortunately this isn't probably going to be one of those. It's a very long story for a very brief point. As Ted pointed out, Section 4F of the Federal Department of Transportation Act, so federal law, concerns transportation projects that would use or impact any property that is maintained and managed for recreational use or historic sites, etc. And when federal funds are used for these projects, as part of your permitting for it, you need to take a look at any of these impacts, discuss them in a public forum, and have the minutes reflect that. So, the long story. What you see up on the screen is what we call the Squalicum Corridor between I-5, James Street, near Bellingham Cold Storage. And there's 4 projects here that all had to be coordinated. The first, right here, is the James Street Bridge that was built in 2014. And yes, it was to replace deficient bridges and expand the transportation, but it also allowed enough capacity for Squalicum Creek to get underneath James Street. Squalicum Creek Reroute, which was built in 2015, takes advantage of that bridge, goes through this corridor, under a separated grade crossing, an old railroad crossing of I-5, and back into Bug Lake. Currently, 2016, the Beta Baker Trail, which starts way back here by Iron Gate, comes along the old railroad grade, goes up to East Orchard, back down to the railroad grade, under the same separated grade crossing, and on to Orchard. No, doesn't go all the way yet. It goes to Orchard Place, I believe it is. The west side of Bellingham Cold Storage. And the final one is the Orchard Drive extension that we're going to be talking about now. And by the way, it's going to be called Birchwood Avenue.
Birchwood Avenue?
But all of the federal, and we'll change that once we actually get to construction and obligate construction funds. All funding documents mention Orchard Drive, and anyway. So that goes from James Street, underneath the same separated grade crossing, and down to Birchwood Squalicum intersection. So we have 4 projects, all in a common floodplain, a common wetland complex. There was heavy coordination between them. So we have, of the 4 projects, how are they going to be constructed? What are their impacts going to be? And as we permit each of the projects, that we mention all of them, because you have a critical area going right through here now with the new creek, and we want to put a trail and a road. So it was all heavily coordinated. And right through this dash section is the section that we're interested in here for the Beta Baker Trail. It's a very narrow right-of-way that we have for it. And what's going to happen with that one, yeah, everyone can read that.
Yep.
Okay, very simply put, this is that dash section. The trail comes in here, comes onto an 11-foot sidewalk. To this point, this is where Orchard goes down to the Squalicum-Birchwood intersection, and then we'll cross back onto the railroad grade and continue on its merry way. This has been coordinated significantly with Parks and was always anticipated as being a temporary section. Let me back up one slide. When Squalicum Creek Reroute came in, or was installed, from I-5 to the Squalicum-Birchwood intersection, there is a flood control berm that was built, and that was part of the reroute. Every one of these projects need to have what's called independent utility, which means that they are not reliant upon each other to be a successful, intact project. And you can't permit them or really get outside funding if you're building a trail that you want to use restoration funds for, and so on and so forth. So they all have to be able to be built independently and function. So the top of the berm was topped with gravel for an access way, and the Beta Baker Trail that is currently under construction will do only minimal resurfacing, if any at all. There's a little bit different grain size from what we usually use for the limestone trail surfacing. If they put any limestone down, it will be just basically to a covering. Trying to think if I missed anything on this. The independent utility is really the key to it. Orchard Drive, this is funded. We're at approximately the 60% design level and about ready to submit for our federal permits. It's funded through the transportation bill and is expected to be constructed in 2018, 2019. It's probably going to take likely 2 construction seasons to complete this project because of the critical areas. Trib W, which is a tributary of Squalicum Creek, will have a anticipated fish window, and half a mile of arterial road, it takes some time, especially when there are certain windows that you can work on certain areas of the project. And the trail would only be closed during the times that it is impacted by the construction. Do you have any questions?
Gene?
Just a question now, as far as traffic problems with this project, it only looks like it's going to be on James Street, pretty much?
For vehicular traffic? There's going to be additional truck traffic turning.
No, I mean, as far as people going up James Street to get to where they live, that's not going to be a big
There
problem.
should not be any road closures whatsoever.
Okay.
There will be some flaggers there, I anticipate, because as part of this project, we are going to be putting in a signal at the Orchard James intersection. So there will be some flaggers and some minor inconveniences, but no closures.
Okay. Any other, yes? April?
What type of crossing are you putting where the trail will have to cross back over the road and get back to railroad grade? Do you know?
Right now, a crosswalk. As part of the pedestrian master plan, we came up with a flow chart, which basically gives justification for everything from no marking, crosswalks, up to a full Hawk intersection. And it's based upon the expected level of traffic and also the expected volume of pedestrian traffic. And following the justification, which we use on all capital projects now, a marked crosswalk is what will be justified. That does not mean that in the future that can't be upgraded as needed. But right now, it's just going to be a marked crosswalk.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, Roxanne?
I just wanted to say I appreciate the Public Works Department because I know how complex this stuff is, especially with so many different requirements coming from the governmental agency and the actual project. So thank you for all the work on this.
Thank you.
I'm just looking forward to this project being completed. We've been talking about this for so many years, and it will be, I think it's going to be really nice. I'd really like to see, a lot of people aren't aware that we'll have most of our parts of the Bay to Baker Trail done, but that's kind of where it kind of ends, and so there's a lot of work to make that dream a reality of a real Bay to Baker Trail. Yeah. So this was information only? Yes, April.
And it probably is directed more towards parks and then EMS, but it seems like this will increase our level of service of accessibility to Cornwall Park for East Orchard, as well as a little bit quicker of a trip to hospital. Is it
Yes, it will definitely do that. The Bay to Baker Trail only goes to Orchard Place. There's property acquisition from, I believe, Burlington Northern. You'd have to ask Parks on this specifically. I know this like third hand. For the section from Orchard Place to Cornwall, I know that is planned, and this will also free up traffic at virtually all intersections around the hospital and provide quicker access from the northern portions, King Mountain, etc., to the hospital facilities. So they also wanted to mention that in your packet there is a letter of support from Leslie Bryson, the Bellingham Parks Director, just detailing the heavy coordination that was done between the projects and the temporary nature of the current section.
Okay. Anything else from? Okay. Well, thank you for the
Thank you very much.
presentation. So we have, let me see, one more item before us, and that's Utilities and Transportation Commission's Rail Safety Program, the opt-in.
Thank you.
Ted.
Ted Carlson, Public Works Department, along with Mike Ollinger, who's our maintenance superintendent. This item is a memorandum of understanding between the city and the Washington Utility and Transportation Commission. The commission is responsible for and regulates at-grade or rail crossings throughout the state of Washington, with the exception of first-class cities. And until very recently, with the passing of recent legislation, first-class cities did not have an opportunity to be a part of this crossing inspection program. Now we do, and it requires first-class cities to opt in formally to the program, and that's what the item before the council today is. Mike and I had several conversations with the Utility Commission to better understand exactly what the program was. Essentially, they will inspect all of the crossings within the city, both the private and publicly owned crossings, to the standards that are in place. Identify any defects, and then notify the responsible party of those defects. If the responsible party is the rail operator, in our case Burlington Northern, they'll be notified of what those defects are, required to make improvements, and do have the possibility of being cited and fined by the UTC if the improvements aren't made. If the defects are within the city's purview as the operator of the transportation system, and those would be things like the surface approach, some of the signage to the crossing, not the signals or the rail or the actual crossing surface, but the approaches. Then they'll notify us of those defects. Although we don't have the ability to be fined if we don't move forward, we'll certainly fix the defects, and it's something that we already do. So it's, in essence, this is another set of eyes on the crossings. Right now, Mike and his staff look at the crossings along with our traffic folks and make improvements as necessary. So we see this as a very positive from a rail safety perspective, and just making sure that all the crossings are as safe as possible. Right now, Mike is really the primary contact with the rail when it comes to the crossings, and we believe we have a very good relationship. And whenever improvements need to be made, we try to do those as quickly as possible. So that's in essence what the program is. Because our rail line does have oil transport on it, the crossings will be inspected every 18 months. For other parts of the states where that's not the case, it's every 36 months. But ours will be inspected every year and a half or so. So any questions on what we do now or what this program entails, Mike can answer anything that we do related to rail crossings.
Any questions? Yes, Roxanne.
Safety first is one of my mottos. So I will be happy to move that we would vote to approve the Utilities and Transportation Commission Rail Safety Program opt-in.
Okay, any other comment? Yes.
So I just need a little back information. How does this affect us financially? Any different, or it's the same?
Good morning, Michael Ollinger, Public Works. This will have no impact on us financially. As it sits right now, when we're made aware of any repairs that are needed, we take care of them immediately. It falls under the street budget, and we just take care of it as a maintenance item.
Okay. So, seeing no other comments. Oh, yes.
Real quick, when you say you're talking about not the tracks, but around it. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, we as the city are responsible to up within 1 foot of the outside track. So if it's multiple tracks, it's 1 foot.
And if there's maintenance that needs to be done on the railroad part itself, do we contact them, or do they? Because we've had a problem down where I work on. Everybody drives over it every single day. The board's cracked. The pilings go away.
Yeah, I think that's one of the real primary advantages of this program. We notify BNSF and their rail master, the road master, let them know of complaints that we get. This really will formalize that program, and the UTC will have some regulatory authority over BNSF, which we don't. We work well with them, but we can't fine them or cite them if they don't do things within our crossings. And the UTC can. So we see that as really being really the primary driver of opting into this program. The UTC, as part of this legislation, they hired several inspectors throughout the state. It's being funded by the state. So when those inspections happen within our city, we're not charged for the inspections. And it really just adds to what we're already doing and formalizes it. And it's just we didn't really see a downside to it. We can opt out at any time, so if it's not working for us, we can opt out. I think from our perspective, the key is when we get those notifications of maintenance defects, we immediately address them, come up with a program. Mike's already got that program, so this would just be adding those lists into what we already do. And there won't be a lot that we're responsible for. The more expensive infrastructure is in the rail's responsibility.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion, answer aye.
Aye.
Okay, we will recommend approval tonight and end of committee.